speaker. The third speaker of the evening is Dr. Azam Nizamuddin. And Dr. Azam Nizamuddin is an attorney and principal of the law office of Azam Nizamuddin, PC, where he practices business, family, and real estate law. His firm advises individuals, businesses, and nonprofit organizations for both litigation as well as corporate needs. Dr. Nizamuddin is currently adjunct professor in the Department of Theology at Loyola University of Chicago, where he teaches courses on Islam. Previously, he taught at Elmhurst College in Illinois from 2002 until 2007. Dr. Nizamuddin has lectured extensively on Islamic theology, law, and civilization to churches, synagogues, civic organizations, and federal agencies across the country. After September 11, he attended conferences regarding East-West relations, as well as interreligious dialogue in Denmark, Germany, Indonesia, Jordan, and Turkey. Please welcome Dr. Azam Nizamuddin.
Good evening, everybody, and assalamu alaikum, may peace be upon you all. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with you on what I thought was pretty cold weather compared to where I came from, Chicago. And I want to thank all of you for coming, and in particular, I'd like to thank the Niagara Foundation, as well as the Turkish American Society of Minnesota and the Biospheres Dialogue Association for really a very important event such as this, and also in light of what's going on both in the United States as well as globally with different communities and so forth, with conflicts and tensions. It's really a wonderful opportunity to talk and discuss, and I really congratulate you on your efforts. This is the second time I think I've been in Minnesota, and I always like Minnesota, a state where someone like a wrestler can become a governor, or a comedian can become a senator. It shows the diversity and tolerance and acceptance of people from Minnesota. So I guess I'm not surprised. Now, what I'd like to do, I would like to just kind of talk from a perspective of doctrine and history to sort of explain what Muslims typically rely on for purposes of understanding the roles of families and how they relate to one another, rather than giving any sort of specific ongoing examples, simply because I believe that the issue of family is a very, I would say, very comprehensive topic, which requires, I would say, a lot more sort of in-depth analysis. Plus, there's all kinds of issues regarding change and evolution of the notion of a family and so forth. So as a result of those things, I'd like to just focus on a little bit of doctrine and history to give you an idea how Muslims look at this issue. Now, the starting point for all discussions about things like living the ideal life, living the good life, and one in which family plays a central role, you must begin with the two foundational elements of Islamic theology, the two foundational elements. And those are, number one, Islamic monotheism, which is known as Tawheed, and the other is the notion of the afterlife, or al-akhirah. These foundational themes provide the building blocks for all discussions relating to belief, rituals, ethics, law, and mysticism. Now, for purposes of delineating right conduct, the Quran provides some injunctions, or hukm in Arabic, for people to follow so that they can exist and function in order to preserve the 5 noble goals of Islamic law, which are to preserve life, the intellect, faith, lineage, and property. This is the essential aim of Islamic law, or Sharia. Now, when I talk about Islamic monotheism, or Tawheed, it's not merely to affirm that in Islam there's one God as opposed to 2, 3, 10, 100, or 1,000, but it means that there's only one God in terms of its implication that God is the creator of the heavens and the earth, that God is omnipotent, omniscient, the nourisher, the provider, the loving of all things, and also the final arbiter in terms of justice. These foregoing attributes of God are not only a way of expressing and understanding about who God is, but they represent the midpoint between the temporal and material world and the divine realm. Accordingly, it is through these divine attributes that we, as human beings, understand and relate to God, both in terms of divine existence and divine acts in the world. Practically speaking, Muslims often refer to these divine attributes as the names of God, or Ism-Allah. Indeed, both the Quran and the prophetic traditions ascribe 99 names of God, which are often used in certain theological settings or reflection, daily liturgical practices, as well as meditation. Indeed, the memorization and recitation of the 99 names of God are for the purpose of incorporating these divine attributes into our very own lives, in order to achieve spiritual elevation through witnessing the face of God. As the Quran reminds us, everywhere you look, you see the face of God. This allows for the maintenance of an ethical balance in a person's life. While we don't have time to review each and one of these 99 names, I'm just going to focus on two for our purposes this evening. And the first one really is the attribute of Al-Khaliq, or God as the creator. God creates the universe and the heavens and the earth. This line is repeated in almost every single chapter of the Quran or the surah. But most importantly for our purposes, he creates human beings. From the Abrahamic tradition, we know that the first human beings, and hence the parents of humanity, are Adam and Eve. For the Quran states, "O human being, be conscious of your sustainer, who has created you out of one living entity, and out of it created its mate. And out of the two spread abroad a multitude of men and women." And remain conscious of God. Now, the implication of this verse is twofold. One, God is creator, and in response to this creation, human beings are to continue to remain conscious of and maintain the remembrance of God, or dhikrullah. Additionally, as humanity expands and proliferates, families grow, friendships develop, but disputes and conflicts will often arise. However, as long as people reflect and remember God throughout their daily routine, then they can maintain the common bond with God and fulfill their duties towards one another. In addition to the creation of the parents of humanity, Adam and Eve, God's creation continues in the various peoples and communities that fill all the corners of the world. At this point, one might ask, why did God create all of these people and humanity? The Quran answers this very unequivocally. "O human being, we have created you as a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes." Why? "So that you may know one another." So that you may know one another. Indeed, the noblest of you in the sight of God is the best in conduct. Best in conduct towards who? One another. Hence, these verses in the Quran provide ample evidence that the idea that creation is a gift which entails responsibility. And this responsibility is twofold: our duty to God on the one hand, and our duty towards one another as fellow human beings. Now, the second very important attribute is, of course, God as being the merciful and the loving, which often goes hand in hand, mercy being a component of love. Now, when love comes into play, it comes into play in many ways, both in terms in its theological implications as a name of God, but also in terms of how we treat one another. God is the loving and most merciful, But in order to really appreciate love, we have to have mercy. Mercy. Why? Without mercy, there can't be true love. In this theological context, God, as all merciful, refers to mercy towards those who deserve mercy, but also to those who are undeserving of mercy. Now, human beings can incorporate aspects of this divine mercy by showing mercy and love to who? Our first and foremost parents, our spouses, our siblings, and other kin. In other words, our family. And of course, from there, it applies to other people in society, those who are negligent or weak or even incapable of doing the right thing. It means good exhortation and good counsel through gentleness and mercy, and not through contempt, arrogance, or condemnation. Now, an example of this in Islam is, of course, we look to traditions and history. And we look at certain figures in the Islamic tradition that we call prophets. So in addition to revelation in the form of Quran, we have the model examples of prophets. And the one prophet that is not only unique to the theistic tradition, but also common to is Christianity, Islam, and of course Judaism, is Abraham. Although prophecy begins with Adam and Eve, we look to also the lives of Noah, Abraham, and of course Moses. As you know, Moses is mentioned more times in the Quran than any other prophet, including the prophet Muhammad. Indeed, the woman who raised Moses, Asiyah, who happens to be also the name of my daughter, is promised a place in paradise and honor bestowed only upon 3 other women. Now, getting to Abraham, the Quran's depiction of the early life of Abraham is very interesting because the society in which he lived, and even as a youngster, he was fascinated with certain forms of idolatry. In particular, he was fascinated by the moons and stars and other planetary bodies. Now, this can be quite similar to contemporary situation where teenagers are fascinated by certain planetary stars, but they're usually called rock stars or entertainers or musicians, or even certain religious, rebellious lifestyle. Or sometimes they just kind of get into the wrong crowd. So I guess this is something, Holly, that you will be looking forward to as your children get into teenage years. And as the father of a 15-year-old myself, I'm facing this dilemma at this time. Now, in the Islamic tradition, after God endows Abraham with wisdom, and he realizes his true Lord, he then looks to his community, and in particular his father, who had a very different perspective. His father, Terah, was an idol worshiper. And during one day, he asked his father, "Father, why do you continue to worship something that you cannot see or hear, and which can't really provide you any sustenance or support?" He then pleads with his father to abandon idolatry and follow the straight path of monotheism. And then he continues and keeps hammering away at his father that if he continues to do this, he's going to eventually be punished in eternity by the Lord of the universe. Now, Abraham's father's response is quite swift and damning. He says, "Abraham, you reject my gods, you reject my tradition, my family's tradition. If you do and you continue to do this, then I and others will stone you and kill you, and now get lost." Pretty damning response.